Hi, George Durkee back yet again for Geography 66, creating web maps using ArcGIS Online. And this is week 1, maybe a little bit of week 2, and lesson 4, where we'll work with symbology and labels. We'll show how to change both to better illustrate your map and make it more understandable. So for those of you who haven't done so, let's open up our map again. And the way to do that is sign into your account, go to My Content, navigate to your web map folder, Geography 66, and find the map you saved, and then you click on that. And that brings us to a fairly important dashboard page where you can do some other stuff. It lists the feature classes you have in there, tells you what base map you're currently using, and you can also edit your description, which is a good idea. And you can, for what we're going to do here, you can open either in the now default new map viewer, or you can open it in map viewer classic if for some reason you want to do that. You can also check your usage and see how many times your web page has been accessed, and then settings where you can mark it as authoritative and prevent this item from being accidentally deleted. And that adds an extra challenge. If you go to delete something, it doesn't make it easy. So I do that and then save that, and we'll go back to overview. And you can also share. And if you scroll down, you can also find other information. So for instance, it tells you what folder it's in, and you can move it if there's a need to do that. And on other feature classes, this is also where you'll find the URL on your server, and I'll demo that later. So let's go ahead and open in Map Viewer. And it'll open in the place you left it at last time. But I had mentioned bookmarks, so let's go ahead. We're probably going to work in this area because it's got a polygon we'll want to edit and some other information, so we can create labels and do our editing from here. So we'll create a bookmark which will create this zoom level and this view, and we'll call it, I've already created one called Northern California, so let's call this one Klamath Fire. I don't know if that's the name of the fire, but we'll do that. Unfortunately, we don't know the zoom level, because if you're an Arc Pro, you want to add that. But we'll just do Klamath Fire, and we'll add that. And so if we move, we come right back to that. Another useful feature to know, get rid of bookmarks, another useful feature to know is you're working in a map, and you may want to access your dashboard, your table of contents on your Columbia College site. So what you can do is you go over here to these 3 bars here and hit the drop down, and from there you can choose any of your other folders, apps within your Columbia account. So for instance, you'd probably want to go to Content, and you can right click and you can open link in a new tab, and that just brings you back to your folders and web maps and so on and so forth, and that way you preserve your map. And another little note on housekeeping here. Some of you may have noticed where I've switched to a different browser. This is part of troubleshooting you might find useful. I was getting really slow map builds and being able to move my map using Chrome. I don't know what the problem was. It was using up a lot of processor. My fan kept kicking in. Anyway, so I said, well, let's try Firefox, and it's working better. So a minor point, but something to keep in mind if you get strange behavior with one particular browser. And another note for those of you taking other GIS classes here at the college, or if you've taken them elsewhere, and using ArcGIS Pro or even Arc Desktop 10, is that the two are pretty well integrated. That is, you can create a project in Pro, and through the share layer, the share app part of it, you can upload it directly onto ArcGIS Online. And the reverse is true. You can download it into Pro, and sometimes working on your symbology and so on within Pro is a little bit easier, and you have more tools to work from. But it's not one-to-one. So some of the symbology you can create and some of the text labels you can create in Pro don't always translate into Arc Online. It'll make a best guess, but it's not always one-to-one. Anyway, if any of you want to try that in Pro, go ahead and I'll try and help you. It's not included in this course, but if you want to create a map in Pro and then upload it into Arc Online, it's a useful skill to have. There are glitches if a lot of your coordinate systems aren't the same, but usually you can solve it. Sometimes it just takes a while. Okay, so let's take a look at our layers and see what kind of properties and tools we have available for editing. And let's look at the drop down for current wildfires. Notice we have current incidents, and that'll be a point layer, and you can turn that separately on and off. That's the point layer. And we also have current perimeters, which you can also turn on and off using that little eye there. So when you highlight one, the toolbar comes up on the right, which will show you your symbology and blending method, and I'll demonstrate that. That's kind of a nice tool to have. I won't do it here and now, but we'll talk about it later. But that allows you to blend the different layers so that you can get different effects one on top of the other. And remember too that the map is built in the order of your layers. So at the bottom you have your base map here, and then at the bottom right now we have satellite hotspots, but we might want that at the top, in which case we just left click and drag it to the top, and it should show over on top of the polygon. But let's make that invisible, and let's get rid of our weather stations. We'll just go with the basics of what we're going to work with here. So a couple of things you're probably going to want to work with here is transparency. And so let's go to the perimeters, and this gives you the perimeter symbology, the daily fire perimeter, and a different symbology for prescribed fire. And there's probably some somewhere, but we won't worry about that for the moment. And notice that the transparency is set at 19%. So with that, you can see through the polygon to the terrain underneath. Now, maybe you want to increase the transparency to give it a little bit more so you can see more terrain under. This is one of those famed judgment calls. So when you're, coming up with what works best, that might be it. Transparency is one variable you can work with. And next is the visible range of the feature itself. So right now, this feature, the polygon layer, shows at all zoom levels. If you zoom it way out to the world, it keeps showing, as does our point layer. And you probably don't want to do that. And so let's go back here to our bookmark again, and poof, we're back. So here's the little triangle right there is the level we're at now. So you probably want it, well, county level, the state level. Let's try that. And it's down to the so-called room level, which is pretty small. We'll leave that, no reason not to. And let's do the same with the incident point layer. We won't, for the moment, add any transparency, but let's go to the state level with that. And again, that's when you zoom way out and you just end up with a crowded map. So what we're trying to do is go out and notice how the polygon has disappeared, and now the point layer has disappeared. We might even want to go in a little bit, but I'm just showing you how to use the tool here. And let's get back to our original. And you can also work on a time layer. I don't think we'll be doing that, but that's useful for, say, the satellite imagery, so you can show different time levels because it has a time field as part of the data layer. You can set a refresh interval, which is useful if you can set it to automatically refresh, and you can set it for a given time in minutes. That's useful, especially for, let's say, the satellite imagery, where you want it to refresh when it gets new information. So you might set that for 2 hours just to make sure you're getting the most recent data. I will uncheck it there. And then a couple of other parameters there you can customize and feature display order, but we're going to keep it basic here. So let's get out of bookmarks, go back to our layers, and look at both layers here. So let's take a look at the tools for changing the symbology. We're going to first work with the polygon, and so I made the visibility of the current incidents invisible here, so that's not really interfering. And so we highlight current perimeters, and then the style tools come up on the right here. And you have the choice to show it in the map legend, and we definitely would want to do that. Then that'll show the colors and symbology for this particular feature class. And you'd have the wildfire, daily perimeter, and prescribed fire, as I said. So let's edit layer style. Notice in the lower left, it reminds us that we have two symbol types, for one for prescribed fire and one for wildfire daily perimeter. And as far as editing the symbols go, we can choose to edit just on the location, and that would make all symbols the same, all polygons the same color. Or we can continue to go with unique symbols according to a field type. And in this case, it's divided up into probably the field of whether it's an active wildfire or prescribed fire. So let's continue with that, even though I think we'll only edit one of the symbols. It shows up the two types here. And also, actually, another point here is in this data set, there are 118 active wildfires shown in the perimeters, and there are no prescribed fires. So go ahead and check this one, and you can move it around. But we're going to change the symbol. And let's move this over so we get a better view here. And at the top, right now, it's in the basic polygon. And we have choice of other shapes, basic shapes here. So let's, and I'm just doing this for illustration, let's try a hatch fill. And it'll give us a whole bunch of different types of hatch styles. And I'm going to choose a simple hatch here. And notice how that changes it to kind of a faded gray hatching in the polygon. And again, this may not be what we want here. And with the fire and with what you're trying to illustrate, it can change with the map. But what I'd like you to do is fool around with different types, get a sense of the aesthetics of what it looks like on your map and what you're hoping to show. Anyway, for the symbol type, let's stick with that. It's done. And for a color, if the bright red isn't shown here, go ahead and choose one of the reds here, and done. And that's for the outline width here. So let's increase the outline of the perimeter a little bit there, make it more pronounced. Okay. And maybe it's a little too solid. We'll add a little bit of transparency there. And now for the hatch fill, that's the interior here, the hatches. Let's stick with red. Again, you have red over here as a choice, but let's go ahead and we'll call it there. You can also, well, this is a little more advanced, but you can put in the exact color combinations in RGB, red, green, blue, percentages, if you really want to blend it customized. And on this, again, you can fool around with the transparency. And I don't know. Let's go with that. And you can also go with the width. I think I wouldn't do much with that. Again, we want to see the terrain underneath and the pattern. Rotation. You can separate it more and offset the whole thing. Anyway, fool around with all of these. See what does what, so you get a feel for what different controls do to the polygon, and also, obviously, for later you start getting a feel for everything, and you'd want to adjust width automatically depending on your zoom level, so that's always helpful. So anyway, that's our first draft. So let's call that done and done. And see what it looks like. Zoom out a little bit there. It's not bad. And it looks like a fire, so that might be what we want. But as I said, let me reemphasize this. Fool around with different hatches, even dots or something like that, and see what works for you. I've used spaced dots before when I just want a light reminder that that's the section that's burning or has burnt. And then with that, use a thicker polygon perimeter edge to it to show the definition of the fire. And while we're here, let's take a look at some of the other tools we have available here. Again, this will show the properties. This shows the table. This is useful because this will bring up, you remember it was, I think, what, 118 different fires. And so here's the fields that you have available, the name, and I don't see a name field there. Oh, complex. That's for a complex. So if you got a whole bunch of fires that are under one command structure, then it'll be given a complex name. And feature category, wildfire, daily perimeter. And if it were a prescribed fire, it would have prescribed fire. And then finally the incident name, and that'll be important later. Incident type, so WF is wildfire. So anyway, that's all of the various fields when the polygon was made or updated, and how they obtained the information, whether it was from a flight or mixed methods, which is, if it's a small enough fire, they walk the perimeter, but they also use infrared derived from fixed-wing aircraft, or a helicopter too will do that. So anyway, a lot goes into mapping a fire, and so you just want to keep that in mind. So that was show table. You can rename it if the name that shows up isn't specific enough. You can rename it. It doesn't change it on the server. It just changes it on your map. You can duplicate it, remove it, and you can group it. And I'll show this later. But this is a recent edition of ArcGIS Online. It used to be in your table of contents in your layers list. You'd have all of your layers here, and it could get to be kind of a mess. But now you can create groups and put individual feature classes into a group. So for instance, USA Current Wildfires is essentially a group. It's got current incidents and current perimeters under one drop-down. And so that's a group. So you can also create a fire group, and we'll do that. So here we just go over one of our existing feature classes and go to group. And so there's group layer. And so we have in it, that's the one we created it on, is satellite thermal hotspots. And let's put, so our group is going to be fire data. And so we'll rename that. Let's keep it as a group, and we'll call it fire data, and then OK. So group fire data, and then weather stations would be a separate type, and then you can also turn on and off anything in that group, and that's pretty handy, and cleans up your table of contents, your layers file. And finally, because we're here, once again, save. Now let's move on to simple labels, text labels. We'll stick with the current fire perimeter polygon. So let's go back to that and activate the properties for that. Current perimeters. And so we're still on the perimeters symbology choices here, but what we want are labels. So these are all of the tools now available for this feature class subset. So you can also look at the fields. You have pop-ups and effects and all sorts of stuff here, but labels. Now we want to add a label class, since Well, first, enable labels. You can turn them on and off. And then we add a class. And the basic label field will be just the incident name. So we'll stick with that. But you also have uh, all of the field names that were available. But we want the incident name. And now let's do the style. And it's kind of a good practice to make the color of the style to roughly match the color of the polygon or the point, whatever it is, so that the two can be quickly associated, visually when you're looking at it. You see that those two go together because they're roughly the same color. But as part of that, you need to have enough contrast so the one doesn't blend into the other and not be visible. So you'll notice the default here was kind of a blue with what we call a halo of white, which I'll show you how to do that in a minute. So that's the holiday fire, and that's inside the Kelly fire. And down here is the hurdy-gurdy fire. They used to have a lot of fun naming fires, and I think it's become more formal nowadays. But hurdy-gurdy, somebody got away with something there. So your choices in the current perimeters label styles are you can work with the font. So right now I've got Arial regular. Let's try Arial bold. That's often a good font to go with. Let's increase the type size a little. So that's for this zoom level, that's a pretty good size. Later on, we'll want to work with the visibility so that the label will disappear if you zoom out too far. And let's try color. Let's go into the red zone again. As I said, you want to get something similar, but still enough for a contrast. That may not be it. That could work. It's almost starting to blend in too much with the background. But you see what I mean. The next thing we can do is we'll do a halo on it. Now, a halo, if you look closely, you can see, as soon as it rebuilds here, you can just see faintly a little bit of white around the lettering. And we're going to increase that and make it more of a contrast. So down here, halo is on. And what this does is when you have variable colors in the background, it allows contrast. So one or the other will show up and bring out the lettering. So I'm usually a fan of halos. Some people say to stay away from them, but especially on variable backgrounds, I think they really help. So let's try a color here. We'll go up. That's kind of a gray. We're going to go more white here, and we're done there. We're going to increase the size. Okay, so that's 2 pixels. I think that works. And once again, this is where I want you guys to just fool around, try different combinations and see what works. So let's zoom out here. Yeah, that works pretty well, I think. And I don't think okay. So here we are at the visible range here. I don't think we want to go too far beyond this. So see what happens here. Yeah, see it starts overwhelming the map. So I think for the name of the fire, maybe there. So you put the name right at our current zoom level, and if we go out one click, then it disappears. So that works. That works. And again, depending on the size of the fire, you may want to change it. In this case, we have, it must be a tiny fire. Yep, it is. So it's got a huge bunch of lettering for a tiny little fire, but for the moment, let's stick with it. And let's go back to our bookmark. What do they do with it? There it is. And go on to the Klamath. There we go. And well, you may want to up the zoom level here too. I'm sorry. Bring the labels up a bit so that as you zoom in, you aren't overwhelmed by still having a label there. Let's let it build and see what we end up with. So you still have Kelly there. That's not too bad. It's scaling as it goes. Anyway, we'll leave it roughly like. Once again, let's go to our standard default zoom level here. And so some of the other variables you can work with, you can edit the label filter. You build an expression and you can edit out certain fires, like you want to show fires over a certain acreage or past a certain date or something like that, and you can edit the labels. You can also do that for the polygons themselves. Okay, so it doesn't look too bad, and as I keep emphasizing here, I want you guys to just try different combinations and see what you like. This gets back again to aesthetics as a major part of any map making. Though that said, Fire does have standards they stick to, and what we started out with that solid transparent reddish was what the Fire folks like. But for your own uses, we can fool around with that. So let's do one more label, and then we'll finish this particular video, and we'll move on to more complicated labeling using arcade expression. So let's go into group fire data and current wildfires again. This time let's take out the polygon and let's look at the current incidence, which is a point file rather than a polygon. And notice those labels are kind of hard to read. They're pretty, what the person looks like they did there is they used a white or grayish lettering with a red halo. And so they're trying to keep the label for the point, which is the little fire symbol there. They're trying to get that reddish so they associate with each other, but boy, it's really hard to read. So let's see if we can improve on that. So for that, let's go to label style again. Yeah, and so you can see they're using a white for the lettering, and 9 point, they're using Arial regular. Well, let's see what we can do here. We might want a narrower type size here. Now it happens that I've fooled around just as I'm recommending to you, and tried different types, faces, and I tried this one. What I'm looking for is a narrow typeface that'll do well with a halo around it, and Arial didn't seem to work for that for this type size. So it looked like this Evanair Next LT Pro Regular works pretty well. And I'm going to up the up the type size a little bit to 11, and let's make that red, and then let's make the halo white. Aha! And see, that comes out a little bit better. We might see if they have a bold, regular bold. Ah, no. Try the bold. Yeah, yeah. So you can see what I mean. So you got corral and the diamond, and that shows up a lot more clearly. And the halo size is still at 2, and so I think let's stick with that. Okay, so I think that'll do it for this video. I think we're coming up on roughly 30 minutes or so. And in the next one, as I said, we'll go to a slightly more advanced labeling strategy where we can use arcade expressions to add more text and other information within the same label. Okay, see you in the next video. Thanks.